It is a painting we thought we knew so well, but we did not know it at all. There is a face in that cloud full of cherubs that no one saw, one hidden in the shadows, that of Michelangelo's son. His name was Ali, and his mother was a slave. There is another face, too, so huge no one saw it, a stormy face in the clouds, that of Adam's uncle, consoling him with a promise that vendetta had been declared. And did no one see that spray of blood from beneath God's robe? Did no one see the terrible reason for this declaration of war? Michelangelo was not alone. 2 years ago it was discovered that every old painting carries a secret. The artists packed their work with clues, names, dates, drawings, clues that reveal a second story, a story of passion, of fear, and of fury at the injustice that life brought their way. Everyone did it, and as a consequence, almost everything we thought we knew about 3,000 years of painting, from the frescoes on the walls of the Palace of Knossos to Van Gogh's Starry Night, was just a fairy tale. For example, what is it that we can see drifting down from Adam's hand? Is it just the wear and tear of half a millennium? Well, no, it's deliberate. Should we take a closer look? What seemed at first to be a trail of dust now seems to be made of letters. It has a name. It's arsenic. But could it really be? Let's look at the letters one at a time, but don't expect them to be easy to see. Michelangelo did not write them for mere mortals. I'll remove them one at a time so that you can see them in the gaps, each made of tinier versions of themselves. First, the A. And now the R. See the little R in the middle? The S, the E, the N, the I, the C, and the O. What we have seen so far is not the real painting, just a shadow of its real self, a shadow on the wall. Michelangelo's creation of Adam is not about the passing of the spark of life from God to Adam, because Adam is not Adam, and the 12 cherubs are not cherubs. They are members of Michelangelo's family. His 4 brothers, Buonarrota, Giovan Simone, Sigismondo, Adamo, who we know better as Leonardo Buonarroti, his 2 sons, Antonio and Ali, his 2 nephews, Johannes and Eduardo, his nephew's 2 children, Giulia and Giulio, his dad, Lodovico, and he himself, io, he says, me, 75, the year I was born. The naked lady that God has his arm around is Felice, the Pope's half-sister. She is not an angel. Indeed, God is not even God. He is Pope Julius II, the man who insisted Michelangelo paint his ceiling, and he is not passing the spark of life to the young man lounging with indifference on the ground. Adam, you see, is Michelangelo's nephew, and if we look a little way down the ceiling, we discover that Julius is indeed offering to create him, not as a human being, but as the Duke of Ferrara. Julius, though, wanted something in return. He wanted the youth's virginity. He wanted sex. The boy had to become the Holy Father's whore, his puto. Unlike the Adam of the Bible, though, this young man said no. His defiant and abusive response is written from his throat up to his mouth for all who get close enough to read. Vada pisciarsi, Papa Birba. Papa Birba means scandalous pope, and the rest you will already have guessed correctly. So angry was His Holiness at the rejection that he removed his protection from the boy. And so jealous was the Holy Father's lover, Gian Giordano Orsini, that he personally castrated, and then decapitated him. Adam was murdered by a prince of the church, and the crime condoned by the leader of all Christendom. And this is what the creation of Adam is really all about. As a result, Michelangelo decided to make the Sistine Chapel ceiling the greatest denunciation in the history of art. He promised his nephew he would do what he could. He declared war on those responsible, and he fervently promised that justice would be served. Ever since they were painted, all we have seen are but shadows on the wall. What art historians have talked about for the last 5 centuries is just the superficial image the patron of the art paid for. It was the cover story for the revelation of evil that was hidden beneath. And the same is true for probably every major painting created from the time of the frescoes on the walls of the Palace of Knossos in Crete, 1,400 years before Christ. It was there right through the civilizations of the Greeks and the Romans, and on through the long-lingering epoch of Byzantium. And then it flourished as never before, undiminished through the Renaissance. As artists fled from the vendettas of the day, it spilt out into the art of other cultures, that of the Moors, the Persians, the Chinese, and the Turks. Indeed, it faded only after Van Gogh suffered a gunshot wound a century ago, and it lingered right into our own lifetimes only in the minds of a few geniuses. It had long been known that artists hid things in their masterpieces. Holbein hid a skull in his painting The Ambassadors, for example, using a distorted perspective scheme called anamorphosis that he learned from Leonardo. Ghosted into a cloud in Correggio's Jupiter and Io, we find a caressing hand and a lingering kiss. And despite censorship by Vatican restorers, we can still see on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel a preposterously pink posterior. This, though, was just the tip of the iceberg. Rocks and cliffs have faces built into them. Robes carry vendetta symbols. Swans peep out from Michelangelo's separation of light from darkness. And clandestine birds of all sorts sing surreptitiously in the trees of Uccello's Garden of Eden. Oh, well, that's the Garden of Eden for you. Nothing's perfect. And is the text there? Merda? Hard to see, so let's look at a clearer example. Resting its head on top of Adam's head is a swan. What we may not realize, though, is just how much more is waiting to be discovered. The letters spell out Uccello's name twice. As before, I'll remove the letters one by one so you can see them in the gaps. First, the U, then the 2 C's. Feel free to pause the video at any point for a better look. Now the E, 2 L's, and the O. In the middle, it says Io, Italian for I. And Uccello, interestingly, is the Italian for bird. Then he repeats it again in smaller letters. First, the U. For centuries, breaking this code would have been almost impossible. But now, combining digital enhancement and the revolutionary insights of the past 2 decades on the functioning of the human brain, the secret can be revealed. And there is a lot to reveal. If we allow our eyes to rest and slowly absorb what is going on, we see here that the whole of Adam's face too is made up of letters. Even the plainest areas are a seething turmoil of unexpected images and words. Some of it is easier to make out, as in this portrait of Felice. As we can see, her name is written on a strap on her elaborate hat. In some paintings it is harder to decipher. Here, scattered across a likeness Botticelli painted of himself in his adoration of the Magi, we find a veritable flood of letters. If we darken the cloud beside the head of the world's most famous angel and turn up the contrast, a wild confusion of images and words begins to emerge. It may take 30 seconds for pattern recognition to kick in, so freeze the video at this point and just gaze until things start to appear. At first it seems overwhelming, but the challenge can be met. There are a couple of things, though, one needs to know about how our eyes and brains work. First, we have two different types of vision. There is the crisply focused image we look at and concentrate on when looking at something. The light here falls on what is called the fovea, and these signals pass through the circuitry we use for establishing how the tiny bits of what we're looking at fit together. This is foveal vision. We are very conscious of it, and it is great for analysis, for detail, and for the small picture. All around this crisp area, though, we are also aware of a much larger blurry imagery. This is peripheral vision, and using both eyes it brings in information from around 180 degrees in all directions. Peripheral vision begins with the light that falls on the rest of the inside of the eyeball, apart from the fovea. We think of it as a second-class sense, and since it is also largely unconscious, most of us don't really count it as seeing at all. But we could not be more wrong about this. Peripheral vision is actually the most important part of our sight. What it does is to identify patterns in our environment, signals that are significant biologically. It picks up any sign that there is something out there that may change our lives for better or worse. In this 15th century scene of people picking grapes, for example, our eyes are drawn to the fingers putting a grape into a man's mouth, to the pregnant bulge in a lady's belly and the fact that she seems shocked at something, and at someone else revealing a biologically significant part of their anatomy on the far left. It is peripheral vision that is picking all this up. Peripheral vision focuses on the big picture, and it is what tells foveal vision where to look, literally. It sends automatic signals to turn our eyes and heads so the input then falls directly on the fovea. Without peripheral vision, we would forever be looking in the wrong direction, and frankly we would not last long. We would either starve or be eaten, be trampled underfoot, fall off a hillside, or even if we managed all that, we wouldn't have many babies because we would miss all the best opportunities. Peripheral vision then rules. It's where it's at. And that applies not only for life in general, but also for breaking camouflage. So, if you can't see the text, don't focus in with foveal vision. Half close your eyes, let it all go a little blurry, and let peripheral vision do its job. That's what it's there for, and it is very, very good at it. It doesn't matter if the image is blurred. Indeed, foveal vision can even get in the way. For example, did you notice the dolphin that God is riding with? It's big, bigger even than God, but it's easier to see when the detail is blurred out. And in case we think we are imagining it, Michelangelo wrote Delfino on its snout, just to be clear. And it's there because the dolphin was the emblem of the god Eros. The other thing we need to know is that the key processing chip in our brains is remarkably small. It can hold only 4 chunks at any one time. Now, if a camouflage letter is broken up, then the brain will need to put the bits back together to identify it. And to do that, it has to find those unique chunks where the various lines of the letter join, finish, or change direction. Get the wrong bits, and we may not identify it correctly. Look at most letters of the alphabet, and we see that there are often 3 or 4 of these key junctions that differentiate one letter from another. To identify the letter, then, our brains may need to use their whole capacity of 4 chunks just to do this. Obviously, as the contrast between these key features and the background reduces, it becomes harder to decide what is part of the letter and what is not, especially if fragments in the background are similar to those of the letters. And if we are having trouble making out the first letter, then if we then try to see the next one, then the new chunks of information from it will flood into our working memory, wiping the chunks from the previous letter away, and the first letter will vanish. Worse, if the letters are close together, we will now have no idea which are bits from the previous letter and which are bits from the next, and the chances of decipherment are lost. Our working memory is overloaded and goes on strike. We probably won't see either letter, much less the word as a whole. If, though, we draw the letters in as we go, combining all the mini chunks into one letter chunk, the next letter will pop right out at us. So now let's try and put this in practice and read what is written along the upper profile of Adam's hand. Since the sky is too light to reveal its difference, first we darken everything. Next, we need to increase the tonal contrast, polarizing the many greys so difference is sharp as dark-light contrasts. Then we darken a few areas that are still too light and lighten some that went too dark, so that we can see the detail there too. And a rather nice U, or could be a V, comes into view inside the box. And now we start filling in the words running from there along the upper profile of Adam's hand. Removing the box, we can now see a very clear E following what must now have been a V, and so we fill it in too. And then, having eased the load on working memory, we can see the L and then the little E snuggled into it. It's a little bigger than shown, overlapping the next letter, which is the hardest to see, the N. And that reveals the next letter, a really splendid O, to finish the word veleno, poison. The next word begins with an A, the left side of which is a bit hard to make out, but fortunately Michelangelo inset several tiny A's into the letter to confirm what it was. This is a common feature of such lettering, and is referred to as fractal confirmation. The R next to it is confirmed in the same way. The S that follows, though, is abundantly clear, and also fractally confirmed. And so it continues to the end. An overlapping E, an N, and ICO. There is another quicker way to show other people what has been found. If one simply removes alternate letters, the hidden ones can be more clearly seen in the gaps. Here is another reference to arsenic, the one we started with, shown in that way. Later videos in this series will show in far more detail how these passionate coded messages can be decoded, and will reveal how painstaking work brings unprecedented rewards. The characters in nativities and crucifixions, saints, priests, merchants, and even onlookers, are all real people drawn from the artist's struggle for life, love, and justice. And we find that each and every character has been labelled with their true identity, which is of huge historical importance, even allowing us to compare previously unknown portraits of the same person at different ages, such as Christopher Columbus, Leonardo, or Fra Angelico. If we know where and how to look, we discover not only their real names, but also their aliases. Here the images marked N are all portraits of Nostradamus, and the others are of a famous artist. From the inscriptions, it is clear that they were aliases of one and the same person. When practicing prophecy, the artist decided to change his name. Do you know who he was? The ancestors of the characters portrayed are there too for all to see. Tintoretto, the artist, Hernán Cortés the Conquistador, Pope Pius II. It's a genealogist's dream. They provide not just parentage, but the year of their birth and death, in this case Dante, and whether they died of plague, or if they were assassinated in a blood feud, and if so, how. Coltello means knife, by the way, and by whom and why. We find secret cartoons of murders and rapes, of insults to the odious brokers of power, of tender scenes of first meetings and romance. The murder of one of England's most famous kings. A knife attack going on in front of our eyes in Leonardo's Last Supper, and the astonishing reason for it. And the flagrant cover-up of the body of a murdered youth being removed from the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the very heart of the Vatican. The art of the last 3,000 years tells a story no one else dared to tell, and that was most of it. Now, for the first time in 500 years, these stories are being revealed in a book entitled Masterpieces of Deception, and the world of art is about to be shaken to its foundations. There is not an art gallery in the world which will not have to rewrite its guidebooks, not an art class which will not have to be rewritten, not an art book which is not now obsolete. A preview of what is to come can be found on the Masterpieces of Deception blog, where you will be able to glimpse some of the most outstanding revelations. And there will soon be other videos on YouTube, videos that will look much deeper into how messages were disguised, what kinds of information can be found, how to discover the inscriptions and decipher them, and how to cross-check and confirm what you find. Unlocking these astonishing tales is something that anyone with a little patience, a love for art, and a fascination for the truth can do. It is time to take art back from the experts. After all, it was not painted for them, it was painted for us.